Business highlights on Trust TV, where I take you on a journey through some of the biggest economic and business developments of the week. My name is Chamun Dabeng, and I'll be your host. Let's talk numbers. We're opening the show with the bull and the bear on the market. In the trading week that ended on Friday, June 17th, the value of Nigerian stocks fell by 2.68%, or almost 767 billion naira. Significant stock sell-offs in important industries like banking, oil and gas, insurance, and consumer goods companies were to blame for the record loss. The NGX banking index saw a week-over-week fall of 5.2%, which was followed by declines in the NGX oil and gas index of 1.8%. The NGX insurance index of 1.21% and the NGX consumer goods index of 1.16%. Additionally, the NGX industrial index fell by 0.08% in comparison to the previous week's finish of 53,201.38 points and 28.681 trillion naira. The Nigerian Exchange Limited all-share index and market capitalization declined to 51,708.08 points and 27.914 trillion naira respectively. Year-to-date, positive returns increased to 21.21% due to the market's negative closure during the review trading week. As investors perceive opportunity in companies trading at new lows, the market may experience improved buy activity in select value counters during the upcoming trading week. In total, there were 5,043 deals with a value of 241.19 million, valued at 3.665 trillion naira. The top gainers for the week were UACN and Living Trust, up by 8.4, 6.48, and 5.26%. And for the top three losers, McNichols, Ardova, and Livestock were down by 9.76, 9.7, and 9.52%. Unfortunately, in this case, the bear trumps the bull. Coming up next is Top Stories. Don't go anywhere. I'll be right back. You're welcome back to Business Highlights on Trust TV. My name is Chamun Dabeng. It's time for Top Stories. Today on Top Stories, we are starting off with the most recent inflation figures put out by the National Bureau of Statistics. The country has witnessed the inflation rate yet again increase, moving from 16.82% to 17.71%. Joining me in the studio today is political and economic analyst Joseph Ago. You're welcome to the show. Now, what are your thoughts on the most recent figures put out by the NBS?
I think it's a reflection of the state of the Nigerian economy. Prices are going up, income is static. But if you look at the numbers, if we compare the inflation rate for last month with what we had a year ago, I think it's not as bad as we had it last year. That's year on year. So we had much lower. We have a much lower inflation situation compared to May 2021.
Mm-hmm. All right, so let's take a look at some figures out there. Now, we do have the inflation rate from 2021, starting off from July down to what we have today. That is from May 2022. Now, in March 2021, we did see inflation rate hit an all high of 18%. Now, we're actually not that far off from that same figure. We're at 17.71%. That is very close to that 18th percentile. And also, let's take a look at Nigeria's recessionary past, should I say. Yes, so we can see where we have our dips, our lows, where we actually hit those recession periods. And remember the fact that we just came out of a recession not that long ago. Looking at these figures, do you actually foresee the country hitting or surpassing that 18th percentile? Are we heading back into another recession?
I mean, the numbers we have already, we've gotten, we're already at 11 months high with these latest figures, inflation figures. So, like I've said before, we are teetering. We are getting to that point where we'll see the economy nosedive and get into a very terrible situation.
Mm-hmm. All right. So, still looking at these same figures. It's really scary to actually think of the fact that we're moving towards this same situation where we just came out from. I mean, looking at the past, we went from, hitting that 18th percentile and slowly dropping down till about 15.4%. And then suddenly, just right after that, there was another hike going straight up to where we are today. What triggered such a rapid increase in Nigeria's inflation rate?
I mean, with figures that we have, the current figures we have, the high inflation is the cause of the high inflation rate is attributed to the cost of bread and staples like rice, gari, and so on and so forth. So the food index is really what is responsible for the sudden hike in our inflation numbers. So food, the cost of food or staples in the market is what has been attributed as the number one cause of the 11-month high inflation figures.
All right, so now that we are at this point, or the country's at this point, 17.71%, what's the threat now to food security? Is the country going to be anticipating a spike in criminality? What is the impact on businesses and the Nigerian economy?
I mean, already, even with the reports that we've gotten around these inflation figures, is that the parts of the Nigerian economy that has witnessed the worst situation is transportation. I mean, the cost of transportation is not like what we used to see before. The cost of gas, the cost of services like repairs and maintenance, the cost of normal petrol and transportation generally. So, to answer your question, the situation is terrible because already income is static. I mean, there's no we're not seeing inflation as a result of increase in wages. I mean, inflation is the wages or salaries are static or income is static. So the purchasing power of the average Nigerian is already being eroded. A lot of people are looking at alternatives. A lot of people are really considering cutting costs and so on and so forth. So the income is thinning, and a lot of people are beginning to explore other options. And I mean, people will get into crime, people will get into sharp practices, people will get into all sorts of schemes in order to make the difference that is as a result of static inflation in the context of static income in the context of general rise in inflation.
All right, so I want to bring us to the recent Monetary Policy Committee decisions that was just taken by the MPC, of course. They made the decision to raise the benchmark interest from 11.5% to 13%. And some of the reasons that were actually cited was, of course, Nigeria's fragile economic state and also to curb inflation within the nation. Do you think that it's really going to have that desired impact on inflation moving forward? Is it too early to tell or to judge by the recent figures released by the NBS?
Right. The increase in our interest rate has done very little to addressing the problem with inflation in this country. And as much as, I mean, there is logic or reasoning around increase in interest rates, I mean, in other climes, like the US, for example, interest rate is static. I mean, the Federal Reserve is not considering anytime soon increasing interest rates. But we see with, I mean, the very sad situation we have in this country, we see central bank increasing interest rates. But this latest increment around interest rates will do little to nothing at addressing the challenge that we have with inflation. I mean, inflation is, I mean, there are three reasons for skyrocketing inflation. The first is the devaluation of the naira. The second is cost push a factor. You know, the general cost of production has gone up. The requirement for production has, the cost around production has gone up. And there's also the demand pool. So because of the fact that supply is reducing, a lot of people are beginning to demand around that limited supply. And so we have demand pool, we have cost push, then we also have the devaluation of naira. So I think the government should look at these three points to see how to push down inflation. I mean, we can look at our monetary rates, I mean, our foreign exchange policy. We should also look at giving subsidies to critical sectors of our Nigerian economy. I mean, petrol is one, but some other sectors of Nigerian economy, I mean, requires subsidies. We should also see, even though it's not very popular with people in government, see how salaries or the minimum wage can go up.
The question of minimum wage, I mean, we still have states that haven't fully implemented the minimum wage. Is it really a possibility or even an option at this point to even think of that?
I mean, it's a possibility if the government is really serious about that. The government can really set up structure to really drive to that point where minimum wage would increase. But I think the government is not really concerned about minimum wage. I mean, government keeps saying that there's not enough money to really drive the policies of government and projects that they intend to do. So increasing minimum wage is something that is very, very far off. So, but I think, I mean, states like Oyo states, the examples of states that really are looking at I mean, salaries of, I mean, salaries, gratuities, and pensions, because these are very, very important points if you really want to address the issues around inflation. I mean, for example, in the food index, the states that witness the highest inflation rates regarding, I mean, around food, Kogi, Kwara, and I'm trying to get the Akwa Ibom. Yeah. Then the bottom, you have Jigawa and Kaduna and Anambra State. So, but I mean, in the top three, you don't see Oyo State because there's something the governor is doing, or the government in Oyo State is doing to really see how the people in that state can be isolated from, I mean, and you know, the inflation rate is not disconnected from the global problems. I mean, we have high energy costs and so on and so forth. So there's that global problem or global situation that has affected our local economy. But the government really needs to see how people can be shielded or try as much as possible to protect the people from the adverse effects of these global problems. All
right. We'll go on a short break, and when we get back, we're going to be moving on to our second story on Top Story, so don't go anywhere. We'll be right back. You're welcome back, and my name is Chamuda Beng. I'm here with Joseph Ago, and he is an economic and political analyst. And we're moving on to our second story for Top Stories, and we're going to be taking a look at the cost of gas. It seems that on a month-on-month basis, the price just keeps going high. So let's take a look at this report. The cost of liquefied petroleum gas (LPG) has been steadily on the rise, pushing more and more Nigerians to turn to unhealthier options like charcoal and kerosene in order to save money. On the surface, it would seem that the sellers of these products may have struck gold. However, the case is quite the opposite.
Well, the way this market is, I can't compare it to before because this place, the market is not organized. So now the market is somehow. Before you sell up to like 6, 10 bag, but this now to even sell one bag is somehow.
My
gain from selling 25 liters of kerosene is just 1,250 naira to 1,300 naira because of how difficult it is getting it. Not everyone can afford to sell it in our area. Sometimes I don't sell the 25 liters I buy. Before it gets sold, it will take 2 to 3 days or even a week. And because I have started selling, I just feel it's okay to continue selling so that it will be like an additional income to my business.
One can only imagine the difficulties faced by the gas trader as he struggles to keep his customers and also keep his business afloat.
People are coming, but they are no more longer buying like the way they buy before. Some people do not used to fill up their 12.5 kg. Some used to pull half, some don't, some fill it up, some pull half.
There are many reasons as to why the cost of gas continues to increase.
Today, what we are seeing in terms of prices, and this is lamentable, is that not only are we still facing those constraints of storage, of bottlenecks in imports, of limited production because NLNG, again, has issues around gas supply, the input, the stock that they use to produce propane, butane, and LNG. Not only do we have that, but we also now have to contend with an increasing cost of transportation. This gas, mostly, particularly inland, is transported by road. The roads are bad. Diesel, I read today, somebody was reading an alarm, it may get 1,500 per liter if we're not careful. Those costs have to be reflected in the price of gas. So you might take gas at X per kilogram, but by the time you add the cost of transportation, mainly driven by diesel, you may find that it is very, very, actually not fine, but it is actually expensive. Okay, so what happens is this. Sometimes you see declining demand, okay, even when there is supply. I mean, that's the truth. Because there is so much that you can charge, particularly to a certain economic group. If it is beyond that, what happens is that you might end up pushing those people to go back to what they were doing. And this is what we don't want, namely, go to the bush and cut whatever little vegetation that is left. Or else go to kerosene, although kerosene really is not even, price-wise, is not even attractive. So the only alternative, as it were, is either you stop cooking and go and buy cooked food, in which case you still have to pay the price, or you go to the bush and cut whatever little vegetation that is left. So what we see, therefore, is declining demand relative to when the prices, for example, were lower than what they are today.
Hard times for Nigerians, as it seems as though even the alternatives to LPG are also too expensive. Well, there it is. That is the response that we got from a couple of people. Now, we did go to a few different places to find out what the price of gas was. And one thing that I did find out was that we have areas within this same Abuja that are selling at 12,000. Some areas are selling at 10,000. Some areas are selling at 11,000. And of course, we have other states which are also selling at different prices. Now, what is causing this disparity? I mean, it's a little mind-boggling that within the same state, the prices differ.
So there are several factors that we can attribute as the cause of disparities in prices. Cost of rent, for example. I mean, the man that has his gas business in the middle of town contends with high rents. He has several taxes, to pay. It also maybe an extra cost on security and so on and so forth. So there are so many costs points that the people, let's say in the city center, are challenged with, that people maybe in the outskirts don't contend with. So these are, I mean, like you explained. I mean, the cost of diesel, for example, it varies. The cost of diesel varies from place to place. The cost of petrol also varies from place to place. The cost of I mean, salaries, for example, there's how much you pay somebody that works for you in a particular location and how much you pay somebody to do the same job at another location. So the varying costs around these cost points is what we see as responsible for the disparities in gas prices.
All right, so still taking a look at the report, of course, you know, when you think of the fact that, okay, a lot of people are now turning away from gas and moving towards alternative fire sources, should I say, using kerosene and using charcoal as a replacement, which, by the way, are actually very unhealthy for an individual. But, you know, one would think, oh, these people are going to be making money. They've hit the bank. But as it is, the prices of charcoal has equally gone up, because people are now, you know, looking for more, and the prices of kerosene has equally gone up. So neither one of them is actually favorable. So what's the next option out there for Nigerian people? Because at the end of the day, you have to eat, you have to cook your food. There are businesses that depend on, you know, the prices of gas, of kerosene, of charcoal, in order for them to run their businesses. So what's the next option?
I think the option for Nigerians is to combine as many of these energy sources as possible. So you might see a household that has maybe one gas tank, then a charcoal pot, a kerosene stove. I mean, there's electricity, so they can get a hot plate. So
even the hot plate is not dependable. I mean, we did have another grid collapse just on Sunday, and that was the only
time.
Can't even. So what if there's no light, you have no gas, you have no kerosene, you have no charcoal, you're stranded?
Maybe we'll go back to primitive Stone Age, where you eat mostly fruits and vegetables. But I think
that'd be a healthier choice.
a lot of people will be looking at combining as many of these energy sources as possible. So they won't want to put their eggs in one basket. Remember, the reason why a lot of people moved to gas was because there was that hike in kerosene price. And so people saw gas as a cheap and very much cost-effective option. But with demand outwitting supply, people are now considering. I mean, my mom, for example, some months back, she was been saying it, that she's considering moving from, I mean, gas to charcoal pots. So I was wondering, I mean, at this your age, it's not healthy at all. So a lot of people are really trying to manage cost. A lot of people are considering the parts that is very much cost effective, and you don't blame them.
Yeah.
Right, so
because there are so many other difficulties and so many other expenses that they have to, you know, put their money into. And even at this point, it's very difficult for the average individual without a family to even save, considering the economic status of the country. So you can only imagine what families are going through. You can only imagine what an entrepreneur is going through at this point. But anyway, still looking at gas, what are your comments on the fact that Nigeria is still importing gas, despite the fact that we do have depots in the country?
I mean, the same problems we have around petrol. I mean, we have plenty of crude oil, but we still import petrol. I mean, we have a lot of energy reserves from geothermal, the sun, liquefied natural gas, and so on and so forth, but we still import generators. So I mean, a summary way of saying it is the Nigerian factor. So there are things that should be no-brainer. I mean, should be the logical next steps. But in Nigeria, we don't see stuff like that. So it's to answer your question is the Nigerian factor.
Oh, the Nigerian factor. I like that. It's just simple and short. What's the problem? Nigerian factor. All right. But do you think that there is a need to place a subsidy on gas or to find some way to regulate the cost of gas within a state?
And the problem with subsidies in Nigeria is that we know when it will start, but we don't know when it will end. I mean, we are struggling, we have been struggling with petrol subsidies since the military days of Obasanjo. We're still having discussions around subsidy for petroleum products when we should have already developed our refineries and moved away from subsidizing petroleum products. So any day, anytime, I'm going to advise against subsidizing, commodities, because we have that national habit of getting into subsidies and not getting out of it.
All right.
So a more sustainable solution should be we should try hard and look at these cost points, the places where businesses suffer, the places where the average Nigerians suffers, and see how we can design policies and programs to really address those.
All right. Thank you.
Points.
Thank you very much for that. Unfortunately, we have come to the end of our show for today, and I would like to thank my guests in the studio. Thank you so much, Mr. Joseph, for being a part of the show. And to you, our viewer, thank you so much for watching. Please do well to follow us on our social media handles. All you need to do is look up Trust TV. Well, once again, my name is Chamun Dabeng. Come back again next weekend and let's talk numbers.